PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds is the first Battle Royale game that I got into personally and what has introduced me to this game mode. Because of that, there was a steep learning curve for me when I first started playing, which was back in the closed beta just before it came out for early access. After the first chicken dinner, I was hooked. Started playing some squads, started playing some duos, and I still am insanely in love with this game, and because of how widespread it is now getting, I'm sure there is a lot of people that are brand new to the Battle Royale style system, which if you're completely unfamiliar with and you haven't seen this yet, essentially 100 people being dropped into an island, needing to loot up, find guns, find armor, and then kill each other until it's the last person alive, with the map condensing you down into one central location, so that way somebody's not just hiding in the back corner of the map the entire time. With this series, which is what I'm hoping to do, depending on how the ratings go, I wanted to introduce to you kind of what I have learned throughout my process and some of my best tips as well as habits to give you a good foundation if you're just starting out playing the game, or even if you do have a couple wins under your belt and you're just trying to figure out what was the magic sauce that got you those chicken dinners. Just so you have some background on me, I have about 430 hours into the game, 70 wins that are recorded and online that I was able to find and is now going to be my tally going forward, and then tons of wins in custom games, which is what I'm a really big fan of in this game. But in particular today, we're talking about those public games. Before we get into anything super specific though, I wanted to take a step back and just look at this game as a whole. Make sure I and everyone else has a good foundation of what this game is, and then kind of get deeper into it. While this may be too basic for some of you, I know it's something I would have loved to hear when I was starting out and trying to learn this different type of game mode. I'm not going to explain the basic rules, you should know that, but a little bit more of strategy. At the core of the game is the playstyle that you choose to implement when you're playing. And how you choose to play is completely up to you. People have won this game with 25 kills fully decked out in level 3 gear with the and they've also won without getting a single kill, or won from just using a pistol, no armor, nothing. It really comes down to how you want to play the game and what your goals are with playing it. But first, let's talk about what the spectrum of playstyles are. At one end of the spectrum, you can play passively, which is going to be typically your players that are the ones doing the looting, generally in zones that are very uncommon for players to go to, or that are extremely far away from where the plane came, giving them the highest probability to loot all by themselves, get some gear, work their way into circle, either staying inside or staying in bushes, and just trying to have the least amount of contact with enemies as possible. Because you're not even seeing anybody and have the potential of dying, you're likely going to get a more consistently high placing here. It may not be first place, but you'll probably see more top 10 finishes. Because of that, you also typically see those players higher on the leaderboards. If you're the first person to die just because you didn't get a gun and there's 5 other people around you, there's no way for you to win, that's going to drop your rating. But that also leads me to the other end of the spectrum, your aggressive players, typically dropping in high population zones like school, military base, places where you're going to be able to find a lot of loot in a small area without having to open a lot of doors and spend a lot of time actually looting in the game. Rather, you get your couple pieces of gear, kill everybody else in the same zone, and take all of their gear that they've now looted for you. Oftentimes, these will be slightly more impatient players, or maybe players who don't even have time to play a full game, and they'll drop immediately at first opportunity and go to the biggest thing closest to under the plane. Using this strategy can lead to a lot more kills, which is important for your kill rating, the other end of the leaderboard system. But it also will lead to a lot more deaths. Even the best players who use this strategy sometimes drop next to a guy who gets an AKM while they just get a machete. You can juke the first guy escaping, get to the next room, but you still may not have a gun, and there could even be another person in there. It opens yourself up to a lot more death, and we haven't even exited top 90 yet. Once they do exit the spawn area, generally if they hear any shots, they'll run towards them in order to get those kills, and if they get in any gunfights, they'll commit to killing the player. A lot of people use this strategy just to see more action, or just because the game's more enjoyable for them, and then if they do make it out of that spawn scenario, they're going to have a lot more gear and already have multiple kills under their belt, which doesn't really account to anything other than seeing that number climb even higher once you get to that end game. And of course, boost that kill rating. But of course, you want to know what is the best strategy to use to ensure that #1 finish, winner winner chicken dinner. While I have a recommendation for you, there is no one perfect strategy that anybody can implement. There's just too much luck in this game. Whether it's what loot you get, where other people come up and sneak up on you, or even just where the circle drops. If it lands right on you and it keeps closing right on you in a central building, you could stay prone the entire game and get a top 5 finish if nobody enters that building. But if it's on the other side of the map, you're going to have to be hauling ass, hoping to find a vehicle, drive across the map, completely giving your position away, and having to adapt to an aggressive playstyle there. This game is extremely situational, and the majority of the time, you're not going to know what the best decision was until you make a decision and then find out in hindsight what the best one was. Ideally, what you should be doing is based on the information that you have, as well as just from past experience where you think players likely will be, make a decision based on the information that you have that will give you the highest probability of making it to the end game or taking down the enemies that are in front of you. If that's even the best option, maybe you just run away from the engagement. Of course, this can be very difficult to determine, and the best way to figure that out is going to be through personal experience. When you die in the game, think through if there was other options you could have taken to give you an advantage over a player who you knew was there. Or think about what strategies that player used to catch you by surprise and end you. Implement that into your game. If you get a nice positioning where you're getting easy kills on enemies, figure out what they're doing wrong in order to give you such an easy kill, as well as try and take advantage of those positions that you're using so you can do that again in the future. Obviously, this can be a slow process, so I highly recommend watching gameplay from players who do have a lot of experience and to see what moves they're making in similar situations. See if you would make the same decision they would and how it works out for them. This is why I believe, at least, this is one of the most popular live-streamed games and one of the reasons that I enjoy watching it so much. I also suggest watching YouTube videos of it, where you can just see those highlights and critical decision points, skipping around to whatever portions you want to see. Whether it works out for that player or not, hopefully it's something that you can learn from or the person will discuss about. For more from me, you can see highlights on this channel, full gameplays on my second channel, Stone Mountain Plays, as well as live streams that mostly take place on Facebook every weekday. But besides that, there's plenty more content out there, and I'm going to be biased here because I have friends in the community and guys that I just prefer to watch, but hopefully this is a good starting point for you, as there are literally thousands of people out there for you to watch. To start, the guys that are on YouTube, at least mostly, or do live streaming on YouTube, would include Aculite, Level Cap, Jack Frags, Stat, One Shot Girl, and Cross. On Twitch now, as well as a lot of their YouTube highlights, I like to watch Shroud, Ninja, Dr. Disrespect, Lyric, Summit 1G, Josh OG, Vis Games, Break, Sacriel. There's a ton of really, really good ones. Hopefully, though, if you are new and haven't seen any of these guys yet, it's a good place for you to start to watch some of the different playstyles and learn from each of their experience. While learning from everyone is great, you can't win unless you're the one actually playing, and going in and learning those mistakes the hard way yourself is a very valuable resource. But what's the best way to do it? In my opinion, as well as what I've heard many others say, is to go into what I call hot drops, go into the zones like school, military base, where you can loot very quickly, get yourself a gun, and then get straight into the action. For the most part, it only takes a couple of minutes between games until you have a gun in your hand and you are shooting somebody. In my opinion, one of the big flaws of this game right now is that you don't have a practice range or some other quick type mode where you can practice those shots and get a feel for the guns. The leaning mechanism, how far you need to lead targets, as well as how much bullet drop to account for with each of the different guns. The only way for you to practice this is to get more experience, or even to just pick a gun up, go off somewhere on your own and practice shooting at a wall. It might be a waste of ammo and you might need to restart and get another game in order to find a gun, but at least that way you can get some experience with each of them. Once you start getting more comfortable with the guns, it's time to start working your way more towards the end game, because fighting there is quite a different experience than when you're shooting at somebody who doesn't even have a gun yet. These guys are generally armored up, they'll have long-range optics or powerful guns, and are likely going to be of a higher skill level because they've taken out the previous guys ahead of them. although it's not always true. Many people make it to the end game just because they've been hiding the entire time. And the first time you win, it may be only with one kill. But once you are ready to start going for that win, the way to do it, at least at the beginning of the game, is to play passively. You don't need to take fights. You don't need to go to the high population, high loot areas. Stay on the perimeter of the map. Some of the more smaller buildings that people were less likely to go to because it's so out of the way to get to, and that should ensure that you at least make it up to about top 50. Now, that doesn't mean you're not going to have any gunfights or any shooting to do. You very well still could, and you're going to have to adapt to what happens. For example, if the circle ends up on the absolute opposite side of the map, you're going to need a vehicle, and you should not be afraid of using them. One of the most common strategies, especially when this game first came out, was to get a vehicle, drive off to somewhere that was very far away from the plane, loot up there, then drive back into the circle with a whole bunch of fresh gear and half the population already dead because they all fought each other down towards where the plane dropped them all. Better yet, the circle could even close on you. Back in the day, there were guaranteed car spawns, which meant you could always go to the same spot. If you didn't get the car, start a new game, get the car. Although it's not as easy to use, you can still use this strategy. And this kind of leads me to my second point, is that you still can't even stick to that one strategy. You have to be able to adapt as you go through it. Commonly, people will either try to hug on the perimeter of the circle and just try and work their way in, make sure their slice of the circle pie is clear. Or another strategy is to drive more central into the circle, post up in a house, and hope that the circle closes on you, because if it does, you have a very likely chance of winning. And as enemies run in towards the circle, it's going to be much easier for you from a nice covered position to shoot them who are running out in an open field. Your goal with playing passively at the beginning and getting to the end game shouldn't necessarily be to win, although of course you want that. It's also to just get comfortable at the end game. I remember very distinctly when I was first playing this game how much of an adrenaline rush it was to be in the top 10. In a very tiny circle with only 9 enemies left, trying to figure out where they are, while also trying to make sure that I don't get shot in the back. Me telling you that you need to stay calm is not going to suddenly make you stay calm. The only way to stay calm in that situation is to get enough experience doing it. At this point, with all the gameplay that I have, I am much more comfortable in the end game. That being said, I still get a rush, and it's still difficult to keep calm, especially with the chaos that can happen at the end. The reason I feel this game is as popular as it is because of that end game pressure. You spent so much time building up to this, and now you are in overtime. Match point, 1 versus 1. It all comes down to this. Sure, some games will come down to a 4 versus 1, where your entire squad is in the circle and the other guy's got to run in. It's going to be an easy win, but the majority of the time, it's those insane moments at the end. With that, understand that there is a certain element of luck, but there's also a lot that you can control, and controlling those elements as best as possible, making the best decisions, is the way that you're going to win. Play passively, get to the end game, and treat it as practice. Because the circle's smaller, you're going to have less decisions to make. And because of how small the circle is, you're going to have more people close to you than ever. This means that you're going to have different scenarios here than you will at the beginning of the game, and it's a whole nother type of thing to learn. When I first started playing the game, I only played it solo so that I could get my own personal skills up high enough to a point that I would feel comfortable playing with anybody else because I didn't really want to drag them down. That being said, if you do want to learn with somebody else, that's a great way to do it, although I would disclose to them that you're a relatively new player. If you are looking for a duo or squad, though, I highly recommend joining my Discord server. It's a free program that I've been using for years. They recently came on as a channel sponsor for my live streams as well, but I've opened up my server for the community, for people to find squads. It's an easy system. We have a huge, great community on it, but I do still personally feel that practicing in solos is one of the most important things. Now, while positioning and making the right decisions is critical, the other key portion to this is aiming. While I don't think that this is your deciding factor on how well you're going to do in the game, I think the decision-making, your positioning is a very important aspect. There is a critical component of this, especially when it comes down to a 1v1. And if this is your first shooter that you're really playing on PC, I'd really recommend practicing aiming, whether it's in this game or a similar game to it like Battlefield, where you have another projectile system. You're going to need to deal with the bullet drop, bullet lead, but even on a more basic level, just being able to aim exactly where you want to and decreasing the amount of time that it takes to get there. A great way to practice this is to just hop into a game with a gun, choose an inanimate object like a tree or a lamppost, and quickly switch targets. See how long it takes you to get on target with your mouse. And if you notice that you keep overextending too quickly, or you can't get those minute pixel changes when it's something that's very far away that you're trying to aim at, then you might want to consider lowering your sensitivity. All of this will be extremely subjective, and you taking the sensitivity of some pro is not necessarily going to make you a pro. That's what they've been using for years, and it might be different than another pro. The key, regardless of whoever it is or whatever sensitivity they have, is the consistency of acquiring target quickly. I've been on PC for about 4 years now, coming over from Xbox previously and pretty much my entire life playing some form of console. From that experience and everything that I've read and watched online, my own rule of thumb whenever I get to a new setup and I don't have the exact specifications is I want to have a giant mouse pad that if I start the mouse all the way on the left side of the pad and move it all the way over to the right, I want my character to start facing forwards and end up facing backwards. So essentially, one mouse pad length is a 180. That allows me to at least quickly turn on somebody if it's really needed. It's going to be a big arm swipe that I have to make in order to pull that 180 off, but it's possible. And because it's so big of a distance, that means there's a lot of room in the middle there that I can get those precise movements from very far away, which is key for any long-range shooting. My hope with this video is that it works as a guide and more of an encouragement to those new players to help them get into the game. I know it can be very frustrating at the beginning, and I think this is a good resource for it. If you found it helpful, I think others would as well. A like rating is much appreciated. It'll also let me know if you guys want to see more of this series to continue. Subscribe to catch all of the latest, most incredible top plays, as well as more highlight videos, commentaries in the future. That's for this one, though. Thanks so much for watching. This is StoneMountain64. Over and out.